Hi everyone, my name is Giovanna Proença and today we're going to talk about practice problems of week 6. So basically in this problem we're going to work with Python, alright, this is the first time we're going to work with Python and this is pretty good because you can see the similarities between the C language and Python. Here we have 5 exercises that are going to review a little bit the things that we already learned in C. For example, conditionals, loops, how to use libraries, and also here we're going to learn a little bit about object-oriented programming, and then we're going to manipulate files, something that we kind of learned in the past, all right? If there's something that you are not so familiar, it's okay, you can practice more using CS50 Python course. It's pretty good because in there they kind of teach you the more foundations about programming, and I highly recommend everyone to try doing some exercises in there and see if you're really familiar with the problems, okay? If you have any question, you can send here on the comment, or you can join our free Discord community and you can ask as many questions as you want in our community, and us and our members will help you out. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with bank. This bank problem is one of the problem sets of CS50 Python, so it's pretty good because here we're going to learn how to manipulate a little bit conditionals using Python and some methods that are already exist. Okay, so here I'm not going to read the whole problem. Let's go already to the goal here. So in the file called bank.py, we're going to implement a program that prompts the user for a greeting. So we're going to ask the user for a greeting, and this greeting can be hello, hi, what's up, whatever you want. If the greeting starts with hello, we're going to output $0. If the greeting starts with H but not hello, we're going to output $20, and otherwise any other scenario that we want, we're going to output $100. We need to ignore any leading white space in the user's greeting and treat the user's greeting case insensitively. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. Basically, we're going to ask the user for a greeting and we're going to analyze what is the greeting that the user is giving to us and how can we're going to manipulate a little bit to check if it contains hello, if it starts with H, and so on. All right, so if you scroll down in here, you can download the source file. I already downloaded in here, it's my code space, and we're going to start writing down. It's empty, the file for us. Okay, so I'm gonna start from the beginning. Let's ask the user for a message. In C language, we were used to use the getString function, but in Python, we have a function that already exists that gets the strings for us. So we're gonna use the input function. So here I'm gonna create greeting, and I'm gonna use the input function, and I'm gonna ask for greeting. Okay, and then we're gonna print greeting and see if it's working. All right, so if I run here Python bank.py, here it's asking us in the terminal greeting, and I'm going to say, for example, hello world, and here the greeting is hello world. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward, the part of the input. Now, to check the scenarios, we're going to use the if and else statements. All right, so now let's start working with if and else. So what we have to do, we need to check first. Let's work with the first scenario where we're going to output $0. We're going to check if greeting starts with the word hello. Okay, this starts with is already a target for us that we can use the function that has name starts with. We have this method for strings in Python. You can check here W3 because that is a really good resource for understanding how some functions work if you're not so familiar. And basically this starts with method returns true if the strings starts with the specified value and false otherwise. So let's see how it works here in this example. We have a variable called txt, and this variable is storing the message hello, welcome to my world. Then we have a variable x that is storing what this function starts with will return, so it will be true or false. And here we're doing the same, this notation. Txt dot, so the name of the variable dot starts with, and inside the parentheses we put the string that we want to analyze, and in this case it's the word hello. Then we're printing x, and as we can see in here, it's returning us true. But if I put here, for example, hi, since our txt variable is not starting with hi, but it's starting with hello, we're gonna see here false. Okay, so this is pretty good because we can use this function and it will help us out. So here we can do if greeting dot starts with, and here we want to check if it starts with hello. I'm gonna print $0. Okay, so let's see if it's working. So let me clear here Python bank.py, and this is good about Python. We don't need to make the file and then run it. We just need to run once and it will already compile for us and see if it's working. So here if I say hello world, for example, it's displaying $0 for us. That's great, so it's working. Now we're gonna work with the second scenario. So here the second scenario, if the greeting starts with H, but not hello. So here we can use the elif statement. If you remember from C, it was the else if. So basically the elif, we're only gonna enter if we didn't enter in the if statement before. So this is good because if we don't enter in the first if statement, for example, if we have hi, we won't pass in this if statement, and we're gonna check if it's starting with H. If we're searching for the word hello, we're gonna enter in the first if statement and we won't see the next line of the code. So here we can use the else the elif. And here we're gonna use the greeting again, the starts with. So greeting starts with, and here we're gonna check if it starts with H. And here we're gonna print out $20. All right, so let's see if it's working. If I run here Python bank and I say hello world, it's displaying $0. This is what we're expecting. But now if I say hi world, it's displaying $20 because our message starts with H. And here the third scenario is the otherwise. So otherwise we always remember the else statement. So here we're gonna say else and we're gonna print out $100. Okay, so let's see if it's working. So if I run here hello world, it's displaying $0. If I display here hi world, it's displaying $20. And if I say what's up, it's displaying 100 because we don't start with hello or H. But now this can be a little bit tricky. We will fail the test if we try to run this way. And why is that? Because we need to work with this last sentence here that they are mentioning. We need to ignore any leading white space in the user's greeting. So for example, if I say the following, if I run in here and I put a bunch of white space in the beginning and then I say hello, then we are receiving here $100. But the first word we're seeing here is hello and we should return here $0. So why is returning as 100? Because our string is starting with white spaces, not hello. So to check if it's working, we need to remove these white spaces. And for this, we have a function called strip. So here we're gonna use this strip method, all right? And this will remove for us the leading white spaces. So now if we run it again, here Python bank, and I put a lot of white spaces and then hello, now it's returning as a 0 because we are removing the white spaces in front of our string, and our string is just starting with the word hello. And we can check here if we run the debugger. So how can you run the debugger? We're gonna put a breakpoint here in the first if statement, and I'm gonna run here our file. So let's see. So as we can see here, it's asking us for greeting. I'm gonna put a lot of white space and say hello. If I click enter, here our variable greeting has the word hello because we are removing here this strip. With this strip method, we're removing the white space in front. If we don't have this part in here, let's see how was the variable without the strip method. If we don't have that, for example, if I put a lot of white spaces and I say hello, our variable here has a lot of white spaces and then the word hello. So this is pretty good for the strip method because we are removing this white space in front. Okay, so now we're able to pass this first scenario that they are mentioning. Now we need to pass the second part, then treat the user's greeting case insensitively. So here, what if I type in with capital H? Let's see, if I say here, hello, all uppercase. We're gonna search for if our string will start with hello in all lowercase. And remember from C, or if you're coming here from another course, every time we're working with programming, the letters in uppercase and in lowercase, they are not recognized as the same one. So if we want to compare things, we need to put everything in the same case. All right, so in here we will fail the if statement. So we're not going to enter in this if statement and we're going to print $100. But we should print 0 because hello in uppercase is the same, we're greeting hello. So how can we convert this into lowercase? We can use the lower method. And why I want to convert into lowercase? Because here in my starts with method, I'm comparing with hello in lowercase. Okay, so here if I say dot lower, and I use the parentheses, it will convert to us the variable into lowercase. So let's run the debugger again and see if this is actually happening. So in here, if I put hello, all uppercase, now if we take a look, our greeting has no white space and it's all in lowercase in here. So it's working and we won't fail our first if statement. We're gonna print $0 as we're expecting. All right, now let's run the check 50 and see if we're passing here. So as we can see in here, we have all green. So now we can go to the next problem. Let's work with, I forgot the word, I forgot the name. Let's see. So now let's work with Frank, Ian, and Glenn's letter. The way that we can call is Figlet. So basically in this problem, we're gonna receive, let's take a look at here, this example. We're gonna ask the user for an input, here, hello world, and we're gonna output the message with a different font in here. And this font we're gonna get from this Figlet library that we're gonna import in our VS Code and manipulate the way that we should. And we have some things to be aware. So basically in this file, we have to implement a program that expects 0 or 2 command line arguments. So here, if the user type in 0, for example, if the user just run the file you saying figlet.py. This means that the font for our message here, it will be random. So we're going to select a random font in our library. If the user has two command line arguments, this means that the user wants a specific font, in which case the first of the two should be -f or -- font, and the second of the two should be the name of the font. Okay, so here this is the first scenario we're going to work. We're going to check if we have command line arguments. If we have no command line arguments, we're going to deal with a random font. Otherwise, if we have two, we need to check if this font exists, and then we're going to manipulate, we're going to get the specific font to convert our message. Once we have this, once we do this checking, we're going to prompt the user for a text. So here we're going to ask here the input, and we're going to output the text in the desired font. Here we have some things to be aware, all right, but don't worry, we're going to work in a bit, and we're going to use the hints because this will help us a lot understanding how can we manipulate this Figlet library. All right, so the first step, we need to install the module in our VS Code. So here I'm gonna install pip install this Figlet thing. All right, so it's downloaded the package, and we're gonna start here not working with Figlet already, but we're gonna start checking here the command line argument. If you remember from C, here it's exactly the same thing. We're gonna use the argv, that is a list with the command line arguments, and we're gonna manipulate, we're gonna check if we have or not. Okay, so let's start from it. We're gonna start importing here sys, okay, and we're gonna do this first checking. So let's see if we have no command line argument. So here if sys.argv is equals 1, and remember, not sys.argv, the length of sys.argv. So the length of our list of command line arguments is equals to 1. We're going to do something. And why is it equals to 1? Because remember that always the first argument of our command line is the name of the file, so we need to be aware of that. So if it's equals to 1, we're gonna create a variable to say that the font we're gonna work is random. So I'm gonna create here font is random, and I'm gonna initialize here to false, okay, and here I'm gonna say that font is random will be true. Okay, so we know that in this particular case font is random is true. Now we're gonna work with another case, so we can do an elif, and we need to check if the length of sys.argv is equals 3. So we're only accept no command line arguments, like it's saying here, or 0 or 2. So in our case it's or 1 because we're expecting the name of the file, or 3 because it's this 2 plus the name of the file. So here elif, the length is 3, we're gonna set that font is random is equals to false. All right, this is pretty much what we're gonna do. And the else case, we're gonna get out of our code because this means that the user is not giving us the correct info. So here I'm gonna do a sys.exit, and I'm gonna say not command line argument not expected, for example. Okay, so let's try it out. If I run here Python, and I'm gonna print out here the variable is random, so font is random. Let's see what's going on. If I run here Python figlet.py, our font is random. Let me see. Yes, I use it here with lower because I was working with C, so it should be capital T and capital F. If I run here Python, here it's missing the letter F in capital again. Let's run one more time. So if I run here Python figlet.py, this means that we're not passing any extra command line argument, so our font is random is true. In here, if I say python-f Arial, for example, it will say false because we were saying here that we want to work with this specific font. Okay, and if I put here, for example, blue, green, and red, we're sending more command line arguments than we should. And here we're saying command line argument not expected. So we are handling here the errors that we might have. Okay, now before we move on, we need to work with this case here of checking this message. If the user provides two command line arguments and the first is not -f or --font, or the second is not the name of a font, the program should exit via sys.exit with an error message. So let's work with these two scenarios. Let's first check if the first command line arguments is this -f or the --font. So here, let me remove this print blah blah blah. So first I'm gonna check if sys.argv. Then how can we access the first argument here? It's on position 1 because it's the second argument. Remember that the first one will always be the name of the file. So sys.argv is on position 1, is not in. Let me double check. Not in. And here I'm going to create a list where I'm going to have the -f, or you can say the following. Let's simplify. If sys.argv is different than -f, or sys.argv on position 1 is different than dash dash font, we're gonna display an error message. We're gonna say sys.exit, second command line argument incorrect, for example. All right, and see what's going on. So let me run here and I say Python Figlet and I say here, for example, F blue. F is not dash F or dash dash font, so we're displaying the second command line argument incorrect, okay? This is pretty much what we need to do right now. Now, we're gonna start working and checking if the font exists or not, so we need to work a little bit with our hints here. So let's use the documentation of Figlet to understand how it works. First, we need to import our Figlet function. Okay, so I'm gonna import here at the top of our code, and we're gonna create this variable Figlet equals to the function Figlet that we are importing. Okay, so I'm gonna do this in here. Great. Once we have this, now you can get a list of all available fonts with a code like this. So let's create a variable that will store all the available fonts we have in this library. So I'm gonna say available fonts, it's equals to this function Figlet.getFonts. Now we're gonna check if our font here exists in our message, okay? And here I'm just checking one extra thing. Let me double check. If I run here Python Figlet.py, we will fail here this problem, right? Because we don't have this argument. So I'm gonna put here another if statement. I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna remove from here, and I'm gonna put as another elif, okay? To check. Great. So now here we have, let's see if it's working. Let me clear out. If I run here Python Figlet.py, all right, nothing working badly. Here if I say this, dash F, things are working. But if I give the incorrect argument here, it should display as a message. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna put this if statement inside of this message. Let's see if now it's work. So Python Figlet blue arg. Okay, now it's sending us the error message. Okay, I'm just gonna check if this is correct in the case where we have this length in here. All right, this is pretty much what we need. But let me fix this code. Let me make this better. If I say in here, if font is random, so if font is random is equals to false, we want to do this checking. So the first check we're going to do is this first one, okay? And the second checking we're going to do is checking, actually this is the first one. So the second checking we're going to do in here. Let me do before this if statement. Because we want to work now in the scenario where the random is false. We need to check if the font that the user gave to us exists or not, like it's telling us in here. The second is not a name of a font. So here we're going to do a try and except block. Okay, so let's understand how try and except block by saying this animation. For example, let's suppose we have this code, try, print x, except we're gonna print an exception occurred. The try block will generate an exception because x is not defined. Then we're going to print an exception occurred. Let's see another example. In this code, we will try to print the division of 10 by 0, but we know from math that we can't have any division by 0. Then our code will go to except and we will print an exception occurred. So now that we saw how it worked, let's start manipulating a little bit to check if our font exists or not. We're gonna try to get the font from our library, and if we're successful, we're gonna store this font in a variable. Otherwise, if we're not able to find, we're gonna display a message saying, doing this sys.exit, saying that the font does not exist, okay? So I'm gonna do a try block, and I'm gonna create a variable called font. And here, we're gonna use this set font using this variable. We're gonna try to get here the font that we're gonna work. So here, the font will be equals to our third command line argument, because this is where we're gonna store here the name of the font, okay? Remember that we're gonna send our font like this, Figlet-V, and for example, let's see here one example to use, Island. Let's try with Island. This will be our command line argument. So in here, this is the first element, this is the second one, we're gonna check the third one. So here our font will be equals to sys.argv on position 3, because if you want to get the third element, it is on position 3. We're going to try. If we fail, this means that the font does not exist, so we're going to exit here saying, displaying this message. Font doesn't exist. Okay? This is pretty much what we have to do. And now let's work in scenarios that is the font is random. We don't know here the variable font is random is equals to true. So in here we're gonna get a random font from our library. And how can we get a random font? Basically, we're gonna use this random library here that has the choice method. So let's see how it works. Basically here, the choice method returns a randomly selected element from the specified sequence. And one thing that is important to remember, here this function that we're getting available fonts, it's a list of all the available fonts. So we're able to use this choice, this random.choice, and it will give us one random font. So for example, in this case, we're doing random.choice in this list, my list. So here we have apple, banana, and cherry, and it's randomly choosing one of these elements. And here we're seeing banana. If I run it again, it can give us banana, or it can give us a different element. Here it's giving us apple. So we're gonna use this random.choice to help us out. So let's import here, import random. And now we're gonna get randomly one font from our available fonts. So here I'm gonna create a variable font. I'm gonna use the same name as we used for the false random. And I'm gonna say random.choice. And we wanna get a random font from our available fonts. So here I'm gonna say figlet.get fonts. And here we need to send our list available fonts, right? Available fonts. Because if we remember, here we have to pass the list we want to get the random elements. So we're sending here our available fonts. Great. So let's print out fonts here and see if it's working. So if I run python figlet-f and then slant, we are following here in this first scenario where the font is random is equals to false. So this is slant exists, and we should see here second command line argument does not exist. Let's see. All right, so we're having here a issue. Okay, this if statement here is not working, so we should fix some things. All right, I'm gonna fix this by creating a variable, a list, okay? I'm gonna create a list where it contains the two words that we are expecting. All right, this F and this dash font. And here I'm gonna say that if our argument is not in this list, we're gonna display an error message. Let's see if this works now. If I put here F, all right, so it's kind of working. Let's try to work a little bit more in here. Okay, we're passing, and if I run this randomly, it's giving us a random font. Okay, if I run this again, it will give us another random font. And let me double check in here one thing. If we run in here doing the -f is lent, we should see something, but we're not seeing. Let's see what is the problem here. Let's try to move on and we see the reason why it's not displaying the none thing, okay? Well, let's work with the next scenario. So now that we have this, we're gonna work with the second bullet point. Prompt the user for a string of text. So now we're gonna get the message from the user here, and how can we ask things from the user? We're gonna use our input function. So txt equals to input, and I'm gonna display the message input. Okay, and if we run our code this way, we're gonna ask for a message, hello world, and nothing will happen yet. Okay, now we need to convert this text. Let's see in here. We need to convert this text with the desired font. So now we're gonna use this final thing here. We're gonna print the message that we want with the font that we selected. So here we're gonna paste this, and the rendered text will be our txt variable. Okay, so let's see if it's working. If I run Figlet and here we're expected to receive a random message, and I say here, hello world, it's displaying hello world this way. That's pretty good. Now if I do -f slant, let's see, and here I say hello world. Let's see if we have here. Okay, so it's working the font. For some reason it was giving us none, but the font is working the way that we are expecting. If I say here dash font and I say Giovanna, it's displaying Giovanna in the font that we are selecting. So this is pretty much what we have to do. I know it was a little bit confusing because working with libraries may be a little bit confusing, but only working we're able to understand how it works, okay? So this is pretty much what we have to do. We have to be aware of the command line arguments like we saw. We need to work with both scenarios if it's random or not, and then we get our input and convert this to the letter we want, okay? Now let's go to the next exercise, that is the jar, where we're gonna see how to work with object-oriented programming. So now in Cookie Jar, we're gonna work with object-oriented programming. We didn't learn much about that during CS50, so I highly recommend you taking a look at Lecture 8 of CS50 Python, the link is in the description. And in there, you can understand a little bit better how it works. It's a pretty good concept to learn because you might use more in the future, especially when you're working with libraries as well. Not if you wanna work with object-oriented per se, but sometimes manipulating libraries, okay? So let's understand first what is object-oriented programming. A good way to understand object-oriented programming is to think of it as creating blueprints for objects. Just like how an